It's okay now.
Okay. All right.
Rabbi,
Erev Tov, just a couple of points. If you could mute your microphone, that would be helpful. I just muted everyone just so this way we don't have to inadvertently hear your private conversations going on in the background. But you're welcome to mute yourself as well. If you have any questions or comments during the course of the shiur, you could always put it through the chat. No one you could raise, you can give me a thumbs up or a wave. You could unmute yourself, or you could put it through the chat, and I will hopefully, get to see your question. Okay, let's get started. Okay, Chodesh Tov to everyone, and thank you so much for joining to learn together. So I say Chodesh Tov because, in case you weren't aware, tonight and tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh of Menachem Av. It's kind of a paradoxical day because, on the one hand, it's Rosh Chodesh and we say Hallel tomorrow, half Hallel. On the other hand, it's the beginning of the 9 days. My father used to joke because I guess, there's always seems to be something, right? It's Sfiras Omer, it's the 9 days, it's this. So he would joke that he would call it the 9 months because it always seems to be, some restrictions involved that connect to mourning. But tonight and tomorrow, so we begin the 9-day period, which is 9 days of the 3 weeks, right? And Rav Soloveitchik understood it in the following way. He understood it that the 3-week period is similar to the 12 months of mourning when a person loses a loved one. So the 3-week period is somewhat similar in terms of restriction to the 12 months of mourning when a person loses a parent. The 9 days that we're entering tonight and tomorrow is similar, Rav Soloveitchik said, to the Shloshim period. And Tisha B'Av, which is next Wednesday night, Thursday, right? We sit on the floor and we don't wear leather shoes. Rav Soloveitchik said that that's similar to the Shiva when a person loses a loved one. The question, though, with the Rav's analysis is that it seems to go in opposite trajectories, right? When a person loses a loved one, lo aleinu, the mourning decreases in intensity over the course of time. You go from the more serious, intense, restrictive period of the Shiva, and then it relaxes somewhat. The restrictions relax somewhat for the Shloshim, for the 30-day period. And then it gets relaxed even further for the mourning period of the 12 months, which you observe for the loss of a parent. But with the period of time that we're in now, so it goes in the opposite direction, right? You have the 3 weeks, which is less intense. Then the 9 days becomes more restrictive, and we're going to be talking specifically about meat and wine in the 9 days in a moment. And then it gets even most intense with Tisha B'Av. Why the different trajectories between what the rabbis described as kind of an old Avelut and a new Avelut? Avelut Yeshana is the old Avelut that we have in which we mourn for the loss of the temple and the loss of the Yerushalayim and the exile. And the new mourning is when a person loses a loved one. And that's like a new experience of mourning. So why the different trajectories? Yeah, Yala.
I believe it has to do with the fact when the walls of Jerusalem were sieged, and it's that whole time that it took them to take over Yerushalayim and then eventually burn the Beit HaMikdash.
That's very nice. That's a great idea, Yala, in terms that it matches historically that the Shivasar B'Tammuz was the breaching of the walls, and then the siege continued and intensified until the destruction on Tisha B'Av. That's a great answer. Rav Soloveitchik, though, offered a different answer. He said that it's really dependent upon the psychology. That when a person loses a family member, you have an immediate sense of the loss. Okay, sometimes the relationship is stronger, sometimes it's weaker, but you understand that you've lost a loving member of your family. And there's grief, there's sadness, there's mourning immediately. Then over the course of time, you process that loss, you cherish the memories, you realize the blessings of what you had, and then hopefully you become comforted over the course of time. So the laws, the restrictions of Avelut reflect the psychology of the process of the mourner. However, with regards to Yerushalayim and the Beis Hamikdash, here, especially in the 21st century, under normal circumstances, certainly, I mean, now we're in strange, unusual times. And that's what it just gives me meaning just to see all of you and to see your faces, and to some of you to see your names. That's also good. But it's great to see you, and thank you so much for joining, because that's important for us to just get together during this time. So it's strange, unusual times, parenthetically. But generally speaking, in the 21st century, it's sometimes hard to relate and to understand what we're missing without the Beis Hamikdash, right? We don't necessarily recognize that we're missing the spiritual, social, religious center of the Jewish people. We have a shul, we have a community, we have Torah, we have shiurim, online, all over the place. So that's why Rav Soloveitchik gave this explanation. He said that when a person loses a loved one, so then the sense of loss is immediate, and it decreases over the course of time. But with the loss of the temple in Yerushalayim, we don't necessarily realize that we're missing anything. But then over the course of the 3 weeks, 9 days, right, we reflect, we learn, and then hopefully by Tisha B'Av, it hits us that we are missing the Beis Hamikdash. We are missing everything it represents. It's the conduit of our prayers to Shemayim, right? We pray toward Yerushalayim and the Beis Hamikdash for a reason. And so we are missing something with the loss of the temple. And also, we think about all the other tragedies that occurred on Tisha B'Av, and even those things that didn't occur on Tisha B'Av are mourned on Tisha B'Av. So that's the reason for the different trajectories. Okay. Rosh Chodesh, tonight and tomorrow, is a celebratory day in the sense that we say Hallel. But paradoxically, it begins the period of the 9 days. One of the main restrictions of the 9 days, let's jump right into enough introductory comments. But one of the restrictions of the 9 days, of the 9 months, as my father called it, is that a person is supposed to refrain from meat and from drinking wine. In terms of the restriction of meat, vegetarians love this law because it's a very easy law to observe. But for many others who like a good steak and like a good burger and they like chicken, right? People sometimes make a very big deal about the fact that we can't have meat or chicken. Oh gosh, how horrible it is. But joking aside, this is a law in the books that we don't have meat or chicken during the course of the 9 days. One exception, of course, is Shabbat. On Shabbat, we are allowed to eat meat and drink wine. Another exception is if a person makes a siyum, right? Or there's some kind of sudas mitzvah, like a bris milah or a pidyon haben, or a person makes a siyum and completes a tractate. So that's another example of where, in honor of the celebration, so you can have meat and wine. What's the basis for this restriction? What I want to talk about with you tonight is it's something that I think many people are aware of, but maybe less people understand the source. What are the reasons, or what is the reason behind this enactment of the rabbis to refrain from meat and wine in the 9 days? Is this a universal custom? And so the first surprise that I want to share with you, and let me take a moment to see if I can share the screen. But before I share the screen, maybe I'll open it up for a minute. You could send it in with the chat box, or if you want, you could share a thought by unmuting yourself. Let me ask you a question. Where did this restriction, when did this restriction begin? Or what does the Gemara say about this law? But secondly, what's the reason for refraining from meat and wine during these days? Any thoughts? Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
The Avodat HaKorbanot stopped in the temple. And because, the Korbanot was mostly sacrificial meat and things of that sort, because it stopped, we are not supposed to eat meat anymore.
Excellent answer. Great answer. sacrifices ceased, were annulled. And the sacrifices, many of them were animal sacrifices, which involved a lot of meat. And so recognizing and in mourning of the fact that the sacrifices were annulled, so that's why we refrain from meat. Any other thoughts?
Moti.
Yeah, go ahead.
Moti says,
in a simcha, we eat yain. So if we eat in this time basar and we drink wine, it's like we are happy.
Excellent, excellent. Right? We're supposed to minimize our happiness during this period of time. Meat and wine, generally speaking, promote a sense of happiness, and that's why maybe we refrain from meat and wine. Excellent. All right, so I just shared the screen with you. By the way, I think on your computer, if you want to have more pictures of the people, so then you could kind of move the border over. I think there's maybe a way to do that. But in any case, I'm sharing the screen with you with different sources. Let's take a look at the Gemara in Tanis, the Mishnah in Gemara in Tanis Daf Chavav. The Mishnah says something very surprising, but first it begins with a comment that teaches us actually a principle for all year long, and we also can compare the month of Av with the month of Adar, right? So we know with regards to the month of Adar, we say Mishenichnas Adar, Marbin B'Simcha, right? In the month of Adar, because of the celebration of Purim, so we increase our happiness. Mishenichnas Av, the Mishnah says here, right? If you look at the, let me see if I could highlight it. No, it's not working exactly. Let's try again. Okay, it's by the bracket there, 6 lines down. It says just like, or in contrast to Mishenichnas Adar Marbin V'Simcha. So Mishenichnas Av, by my cursor there, Mishenichnas Av Mematin V'Simcha. So when Av arrives tonight, tomorrow, so we minimize our level of simcha. What this teaches all of us, by the way, is that a Jew has to be in a state of simcha all year long, right? We ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. We always have to be in a state of happiness, feeling the blessings of this world, and also the fact that we observe Torah, we have relation with Hashem, we have relation with others. It's just that in Adar, we increase it, and in Av, in the month of Av, we decrease it. Let's skip now a couple of lines. 3rd line from the end. So it says, Erev Tisha B'Av, 3 lines from the bottom there in that source. Erev Tisha B'Av, on the eve of Tisha B'Av, Lo Yochel Adam Shnei Tavshilim, a person shouldn't eat 2 cooked foods. Lo Yochal Basar V'Lo Yishta Yayin. You shouldn't eat meat, and you shouldn't drink wine. And Reb Shimon Gamliel Omer Yishane. Reb Shimon Gamliel says, no, you don't have to completely refrain from meat and wine, but rather you should just make a distinction between this day and all other days. That's the Mishnah. Just parenthetically, the sources 2 and 3 teach us additional observances of these days, being the fact that we minimize our level of simcha. So a person is not supposed to sort of engage or start a construction project. You're not supposed to plant a garden or do significant planting in your garden. In source number 3 in Yevamot, it says that you don't get married. We don't arrange marriages, even if right, they have a chassan and kala, they want to get married. No, you're not supposed to get married in the 9 days. In source number 2, it says that if you have a lawsuit, if you want to fight a traffic ticket or a speeding ticket, so if you want to fight a speeding ticket, the month of Av might not be the best month to do so. Better to schedule it for Adar or another month. Why? Because it's a month, Av is a month of misfortune. It's fraught with risk historically and even in modern times. And so if you have a significant court case, if you're able to change a date, you shouldn't do it in the month of Av. And when we say month of Av, what we usually mean is what? We usually mean at least through Tisha B'Av, Now, what's interesting, if somebody could share with me, what's interesting about the Mishnah in terms of this custom? We said there's a custom that's very well known that we refrain from meat and wine in the 9 days. What does the Mishnah say about this custom? What's clear is that the Mishnah says that there's only a restriction on the day before Tisha B'Av. And even with regards to that, in source number 4, Amar Rav Yehuda in the underlines, it says, Lo shanu ela mishei shos u'lamala. In the underlines, Rabbi Yehuda says that this law in the Mishnah that you're not allowed to have meat and wine is only in the afternoon prior to Tisha B'Av. Moreover, if you look at the Amar Rav Yehuda, it says the Amar Rav Yehuda in the fourth line here, Amar Rav Yehuda lo shanu ela b'suda hamafsik ba. There's only a restriction and a prohibition in the eyes of the Gemara in the last meal prior to Tisha B'Av. That last meal is called the Sudas HaMafsekes, right? Now, is there any other time of the year where you have a Sudas HaMafsekes?
Yom Kippur.
Very good, very good. But the nature of each is very different. The nature of the meal preceding Yom Kippur is a lavish meal in which you can have all the food you want. It's to prepare you for the fast day. That's called the Sudas HaMafsekes right before Yom Kippur. And then you have a Sudas HaMafsekes. It's kind of like the meal that divides, or the meal that's considered the break. There's a Sudas HaMafseket before Tisha B'Av. Here, this meal is with just toast, a little bit of ashes, and a round egg, and you sit on a low chair. So what the Gemara is saying is something astonishing. The Gemara is saying, right, that the restriction of the Mishnah of not having meat and wine on Erev Tisha B'Av, it's not even the whole Erev Tisha B'Av that you have to refrain from those things. It's only if the meal is in the afternoon, and it's only for the last meal. And that's what the Gemara concludes. The Gemara concludes that it's only in the afternoon and only in the last meal is there a restriction of having meat and wine. And it's in that meal where you're not supposed to have 2 cooked foods. So here you have an amazing thing, right? That that according to the Gemara, it sounds like it's permitted. It sounds like it's permitted to have meat and wine when? During the course of the 9 days. So that's what I'm sharing with you just to start, is that at least from the Babylonian Talmud and from the Mishnah, seems like in the 9 days it's permitted to have meat and wine. There's a whole discussion about on Erev Tisha B'Av, the last meal after Chatzot. That's when there's a restriction. Yeah. So let's take a look now at the passage in the Yerushalmi. All right, so that's in Psachim Dalet Aleph, and the Yerushalmi in source number that I have marked as 8. Hopefully you can see that there. Let's get back to it here. So if you look at the top, look at the brackets. Look at the brackets in source number 8. Amar Rav Zeira. Okay, you ready? Here we go. I want to hear from you what you think about this source. Amar Rav Zeira. Nashi, women. Okay, it's where my cursor is. Okay. And I'm pointing to the second line at the end of the line. You have it?
Yes.
Can you see it? Yeah. Give me a thumbs up if you could see it. Sure. Okay, great. At least the people who I see here seem to be able to see it. And you guys could send in a chat or let me know if you have trouble seeing it. So, okay, back to the end of the second line. Nashi, women. The Nahagin, who have the custom. The lo lemishte. To not do something that's called lemishte. We'll have to analyze that word. Min da'av olil, from the beginning of Av. Olil means like from the moon. So from the moon of Av, minhag, it is considered a valid, legitimate minhag. All right, so this is a source from the Jerusalem Talmud. As many of you know, there's one 6-volume Mishnah that's called Shas Mishnayot. But there's 2 Talmuds. One is the Babylonian Talmud, and one is the Jerusalem Talmud. And so before, in the earlier source, we were learning the Babylonian Talmud, and now we're learning the Jerusalem Talmud. In the Jerusalem Talmud, it says over here, it's talking about different customs that people observe. And the context of this passage is that a lot of people observe strange customs that don't have any basis. Like, for example, did you know that when a person finishes Shemona Esrei, right, you take 3 steps back. You take 3 steps back and you go like this and like this and like this, right? Osa Shalom Ramav, Uyasa Shalom Aleinu, Val Koyesrov Murameh. And then you say the Yiratzon little paragraph and you take 3 steps forward. A lot of people take the 3 steps forward and then they lift their feet 3 times at that point. So that's a mistaken minhag. There's really no basis to that custom to lift your feet 3 times at the end of Shemona Esrei. The reason why we do that is because if you're davening with a minyan, and if there's going to be the repetition of the Shemona Esrei, so then what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to wait until Kedusha. You're supposed to wait until Kedusha to take the 3 steps forward. And then when you take the 3 steps forward, what do you do soon after you take the 3 steps forward? You say, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. So when you say Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh in the Kedusha, that's when you lift your feet 3 times. So that's the time when you lift your feet right after your Shemona Esrei and when you take the 3 steps forward. But let's say you're not davening, let's say you're davening Mariv, where there's no repetition of the Shemona Esrei, or let's say you're not davening with a minyan and you're just saying Shemona Esrei, so you take the 3 steps forward. You don't lift 3 feet, you don't lift your heels 3 times. There's a lot of made up customs that people observe, and minhag is something incredibly important, but some are legitimate customs and some are mistaken customs. So the Talmud Yerushalmi is talking about which customs have the status of legitimacy in the eyes of halacha. Now that's not so important in terms of that context, but in that context, the Yerushalmi says that those women who have a custom to not lemishtieh, to refrain from mishtieh, from the beginning of the month of Av, that is considered a valid, legitimate minhag. In other words, this is in the category of a valid minhag for a person to observe. But what is it really saying? So what a lot of different sources suggest is that, so what does Lola Mishtieh mean? Does anyone know what does Lola Mishtieh mean?
What? Even Shtiah?
What does it mean when it says Lola Mishtieh? What is Shatiyah? What is Shatiyah?
That's a place where when you drink in a party or something, it's like.
Okay. So Ron suggests one meaning of the word lemishtieh could mean to party, right? Everyone's having such a great time now. You guys are all excited, but it's not a party, right? So perhaps what it's saying is that the person shouldn't have a party. The other possibility is lemishtieh is from the word, right, shatiyah, from shoteh, from a drink, right?
Right.
So what a number of commentaries in the 12th century, 13th century, 14th century, they understood this passage in Yerushalmi to be the source for refraining from meat and wine. And let's go back to the source just to show you a couple of these sources, which is really interesting. Right, so the Gemara first, by the way, says that the reason why the women have this custom is because Shebo Paska Even Shatiyah, because the foundation stone in Yerushalayim stopped functioning. All right, so that the women who have this custom was because the Even Shatiyah on the Har HaBayit in Yerushalayim stopped functioning. We'll come back to that. The Kolbo, in source number 10, take a look if you see towards the bottom of your screen, hopefully you can see this. So it says, Amar Rabbi Yishmael, in source 10, left-hand column. Okay, I just highlighted it. So the Kolbo, right before the highlight, he says that I've noticed that there are some women, aristocratic, regal women, who refrain from eating meat and drinking wine from the 17th of Tammuz until the 10th of Av, for the whole 3-week period. And he says that they received this custom from generation after generation. And there are those men that also observe the custom, says the Kolba. And then he says, he quotes the Yerushalmi by the highlight, Amar Rabbi Ishmael. We have it as Amar Rabbi Zeira. So he quotes it as Amar Rabbi Ishmael. He says, Alin Nashi, the Nehige, the Lola Mishtei Chamra, those women who have the custom not to have Chamra,
Wine.
not to have wine. Chamra is wine. From the beginning of Av, then it's considered a minhag because the foundation stone in Yerushalayim stopped functioning. So what does the Kolba do very interestingly? He adds a word in the text. In the original Jerusalem passage that we saw, which word was missing? The word chamra. The word chamra wasn't in there. Wine wasn't in there. Look, above, right? It says in the underline over here. It says the lola mishtieh.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mention anything about wine. In the Kolbo, he quotes the source. Either he had such a variant text of the Talmud, of the Jerusalem Talmud, or this was kind of his interpretation of it, that when it says the Lola Mishteh, what it means is that they didn't drink wine. Even according to the Kolbo, which we're talking 13th century, what doesn't it mention? That's right, it doesn't mention meat, just mentions wine. Look at source number 11, however, the Machzor Vitri at the bottom. Here he says that, let's see if I can find it. Well, no, here, let's second. Move this away. Here, I want to show you source number 12, which is the source number 12, which is the Sefer HaManig, I believe. I can't see it because it's being blocked by my screen, but yes, it's a Sefer HaManig. So here what he says, he quotes Rav Zeira. You see the top line of my highlighting, and it says, what does it say? Anyone want to read it?
Yeah.
Zeira Nashi.
The Nehigan.
דלא למשתה חמרה ודלא למיכל בסרה.
Oh.
Neither one.
Oh, so what do you see? Something amazing, isn't it? In the passage itself, it just said that women have a custom, delo lemishteh.
Mm-hmm.
It was the Kolbo who added the word chamra, that women have been observing this custom of not drinking wine. And now it's the Sefer HaManig from the 14th, 15th century who quotes the same passage in the Yerushalmi, in the Jerusalem Talmud. And here he has his version of the text is that they have a custom not to drink wine and not to eat meat from the beginning of Av until the end of the fast, because the foundation stone was annulled, stopped functioning. All right. So there's basically, I want to ask three questions. Three questions.
Sure.
Number one, meaning for those who suggest that this source is the basis for not having meat and wine, what's the question? Well, one question is it doesn't mention wine and meat in the passage, right? You with me?
Yes.
The second question is, what's another question you could ask?
Why is he making a distinction between women and men?
Thank you very much, Sam. Excellent.
Exactly.
Why does he make a distinction between women and men? What is this? What men don't count? Men don't have a role in Judaism? What, men don't mean anything? It's just about women? What is this? Right? We believe in equality. The mitzvot and customs that apply to women should apply to men too. I want a role to play as well. And so, great. So, first question is, the source doesn't mention meat or wine. The second question is, why does it focus just on women? What's another question you could ask?
Who keeps adding these words, these extra words?
Very good, right? Who has the right to just add words to the text just to fit to fit their agenda? The third question I'll ask though is that the third question I'll ask is what in the world is the connection between whatever this custom is and the foundation stone. Right? Remember that? We said that, that the reason why women have this custom is because the foundation stone stopped functioning on Rosh
Right.
Chodesh.
Yeah.
What's the connection? So any thoughts? What's going on over here? Yeah, Ron.
Well, first of all, there was also nesech of wine when you poured the wine, which stopped. And once the temple was destroyed, the foundation stone is basically the place where the temple was built upon, And so once the temple is destroyed, the foundation stops functioning, and there's no korbanot, and there's no nesech of the wine. So therefore, you're not supposed to do either one. Because there's no nesech, you don't drink wine. There's no korbanot, you don't drink meat, you eat meat.
Excellent. So this kind of fits your analysis that you presented earlier, Ron, which is that it fits into your picture with if the nullification of the sacrifices. So that shows, that kind of leads right into the connection with the foundation stone, which is exactly in that spot. What I want to share with all of you now is that this is basically all one big mistake. It's that really the passage in Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem passage, is this passage over here, source number 8, is really not talking at all about meat and wine. And what I'm telling you now and what I'm sharing with you is something that I learned from the Sefer from Rabbi Daniel Sperber. And he points out, he says, Lemishtiye, if you look at, here, let me bring you to the source that could. Let me see if I can get it here. Yeah, so take a look at source 14. At source 14, where he says, this is from the Or Zarua, Rav Yitzchak of Vienna, 14th century. And what's interesting is that you have many, many commentaries, as I've showed you, that view the Jerusalem Talmud passage as the source for refraining from meat and wine. What the Or Zarua quotes from Rav Nisim Gaon is that it's really all one big mistake. And Rav Daniel Sperber demonstrates it conclusively and compellingly that what? Rav Nisim Gaon lo garis chamar.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have that word chamar. Ela garis de lo lemishtei amra. Lemishtei could mean to weave. The different parts of the weaving tool are the warp and the woof, which are known as the shasi and the arev. Lo lemishtei doesn't mean that they didn't drink wine. What it really means, my friends, is that there was a custom that developed not to weave garments, not to manufacture clothing during these days. This explains, because if it's drinking wine and eating meat, women and men drink wine and eat meat. If it's weaving garments, perhaps, I'm not sure, but perhaps this is something that maybe women were more into crocheting, into knitting and weaving. And they took upon themselves to not knit and crochet and to weave in the 9 days. That's why it specifically mentions women. It's not talking about meat and wine. If it was, it would have mentioned those words about meat and wine. It's talking about weaving garments. So it just says Lola Mishteh. They don't weave. W-E-A-V-E. They don't weave in the 9 days. And this is the connection with the foundation stone in the Beis HaMikdash. Why? Because the rabbis understood in the Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, it says that from the foundation stone, that's where the world was created from. That's kind of viewed as like the belly button and center of the world. And God stretched out the warp and the woof, horizontally and vertically. That's the warp and the woof. And the tradition has it, and the rabbis understood that God created the world from Yerushalayim, from the Har HaBayit, from the foundation stone in the temple, this rock. And from there, God created the world. When the sacrifices were annulled and the base of Midrash was destroyed and the foundation stone stopped functioning, when the foundation stone stopped working, and whatever spiritual energy came out of the foundation stone, I'm not sure. But when that foundation stone stopped functioning, that's why women started observing this custom to not weave with the warp and the woof, because the world was created from the foundation stone. When the foundation stone stopped functioning, they took upon themselves, women who were involved in that, profession or in that hobby of weaving or knitting, they were the ones who took upon themselves this custom of not weaving to commemorate this dimension of the Churban. So that's, you have it in source 15, just to put it into those words. No, it's not chamra, it's not wine, but rather it's amra. Amra is what? Amra means wool. Amra means wool. Amra means wool. Okay, let me bring you back because I like seeing everyone, and so all right. So that's the first source that could be the basis. But what I've tried to show you is that it's very interesting, and I think it's just fascinating how a source kind of like takes on a life of its own, and people add a word here and a word there, and suddenly it's a source for refraining from meat and wine, when really the Gemara doesn't mention those words. And the Gemara in the Yerushalmi, according to Rabbi Daniel Sperber, and he makes a compelling argument, the Gemara is not talking about meat and wine altogether, but rather is talking about refraining from weaving garments during the 9 days. And indeed, that law of not weaving in the 9 days is quoted in the Shulchan Aruch, that we don't fashion, we don't tailor, we don't weave garments in the 9 days. Another possible source for refraining from meat and wine is Sefer Daniel. In the book of Daniel, it says that he refrained for shalosha shvuim yamin. It says that he refrained for 3 weeks from having, let's see if I could bring it up here. Source 19, the 3rd year of Koresh. Hold on 1 second.
Somebody has an alarm going and it's really annoying. Can you hear it, or is it just me?
Yeah, can you, I noticed the same thing, and I was just trying to mute the person. Hold on. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. I hope that wasn't bothering you too long. Let me now share the screen back again. Okay, so the other possible proposal, and I marked it here on the left corner, proposal number 2, in terms of a source for this whole law, is that Daniel was someone who was living in the exile, and he's writing here in chapter 10 of Daniel in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia. And he says, by Yamim Mahim, Daniel wanted to mourn the fact that he was in exile. And take a look at these psukim here. By Yamim Mahim, in those days, see if I can highlight it there. Hayitim et Abel, he says, I was in mourning for being in exile of the loss of Yerushalayim, Shlosha Shvuim Yamim. Now, this could be interpreted to mean 21 years, which is one of the commentaries says that, but other commentaries say that no, Shlosha Shvuim Yamim is 3 weeks. And it says, Lechem chamudos lo achalti, I didn't eat fine bread, ubasar v'yayin lo boil pi, and meat and wine did not come into my mouth. So the Shibbolei Haleket from Italy, 1500s, right there, source 21, Masasi v'Shem Rabbeinu Esadigon, Shem Yishiv Asr B'Tamuz, Atishabav, for the 3 weeks, Hen Yamim Ha'amurim B'Daniel, Shehesana Shlosh Shvuim, that the reason why we refrain from meat and wine for the 3 weeks is, the precedent for this is Daniel, who fasted or refrained from these foods for 3 weeks. The Yeshin is Harim Behen Shalo Lechol Basar V'Lishos Yayin, that those who refrain from meat and wine Kidechsiv, as the pasuk says, ubasar v'yayin, right? Meat and wine, lo ba LP. Now, Daniel, it could be that it's talking 21 years, and but we're going to interpret it that it's referring to 3 weeks. But the custom of refraining from meat and wine is when? Just for the 9 days. So, well, this is interesting because in the Shulchan Aruch, I just, for full disclosure, he actually quotes 3 opinions. One opinion is to refrain from meat and wine for the 3 weeks. Another opinion is to refrain from meat and wine in the 9 days. And another opinion is to refrain in the Shvuah Shachabo, is in the week in which Tisha B'Av occurs. We kind of take the middle ground, right? We're centrist Orthodox. But joking aside, we take the middle opinion, and it's a minig Yisrael to refrain for the 9 days. Even the Rambam, by the way, if we go back to the Rambam, well, let's see if I could find it here as I journey through these sources. The Rambam in source number 5 says, V'kvar nogu Yisrael. Back to source number 5, he says that it's already a minig, it's a minig among the Jewish people, Shelo lechol basar b'shabazu, not to eat meat in the week in which Tisha B'Av occurs. And then he says, V'yesh mekamot, and there are those places, shenagu levatel hashchita mirosh chodesh. And there are places where they nullified slaughtering of animals from Rosh Chodesh. I take the Rambam to mean that they refrain from having meat for the 9 days, and they kind of like put away the butcher knife from Rosh Chodesh Av. So already, again, even though the Gemara, right, the Babylonian Talmud says there's only a restriction on the few hours before Tisha B'Av. Even the Jerusalem Talmud, we thought maybe was a source for it, but no, that's talking about weaving garments, and it's a minig that women accepted upon themselves. It's not even talking about meat and wine. And however, already we see one of the earliest sources for the custom is in the Rambam. In the Rambam in the 1100s, he already says that they put away the butcher knife from Rosh Chodesh Av, and over the course of the following centuries, the custom developed either for the 3 weeks, or for the 9 days, or the Shvuah Shechalbo, the week in which Tisha B'Av occurs.
Go back to the Rambam. I had a question.
Yeah.
On the Rambam. I lost. Where were you? I lost it. Go back to the Rambam. There was something that bothered me in the language there.
What do you remember? What it was?
Yeah, it says that you don't eat meat on Shabbos.
No, what he means, Alan, what he means by that is that there's a custom not to eat b'Shabbazu. Shabbos could mean week. The Rambam means over there, b'Shabbos, he means in that week. Thank you for pointing that out so I can clarify it.
I have a question.
I'm pretty sure the Rambam means there in that week. Shabbos could mean a week. Okay. What I think are the most compelling reasons, ladies and gentlemen, is found in the commentary of the Beis Yosef. It's not, I don't know if it's based on Daniel, because Daniel was talking about the 3 weeks. But also Daniel mentions not having bread, not having fine bread. And even if it is Daniel, we don't understand exactly why we would have such a custom. And we didn't find it in the Babylonian Talmud, we didn't find the Jerusalem Talmud. Where is this custom based on? So don't leave the shir yet, because if you leave the shir now, you'll say, there's no basis for the custom. Rabbi Topp said there's no reason to observe it. I'm good to go. Let's have a barbecue tomorrow. So let's quote before you do that, let's quote 2 other reasons. And this is in source 23. In source 23, so he quotes the Kalbo. Now, we quoted the Kalbo earlier, who quotes the Jerusalem Talmud. But here, the Beit Yosef, this is Rav Yosef Karo, in one of his book, in his commentary on the Tur. We know Rav Yosef Karo wrote the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch is basically the conclusions and the summaries of his longer commentary called the Beit Yosef. Parenthetically, Rav Yosef Karo felt that people are not going to have the time to study my lengthy commentary of the Beit Yosef. So let me make it like a set table. I'll call it the Shulchan Aruch, and people will just be able to learn just the quick halachot. But the Shulchan Aruch by Rav Yosef Karo is based on Rav Yosef Karo, his own commentary called the Beit Yosef, which is a commentary on the Tur. Now, in this commentary, he quotes the Kalba, who says, "Lefi she'ein simcha ela b'basar v'yayin.
That's
And
what Moti said.
this was stated earlier, right? This was stated, I think it might have been Mati, who said that, right? That when Av begins, when the month of Av begins, we minimize our simcha. We don't have weddings. We try to avoid doing laundry, right? We minimize. We're already not getting haircuts from Shavasa B'Tamas, but we're minimizing our level of happiness because we're getting a deepening sense of what we're missing in Galut, and the fact that we feel a sense of distance from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And especially during these days of the pandemic, we don't know why it's happening. We don't understand the reason for it. What is God's plan? So this is a time where we really feel the Galut. We feel the distance from Hashem, but it's at this time that we have to strengthen our resolve, and we have to deepen our faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the show. We have to continue to daven to Him, of course, but we minimize our simcha during this time to reflect our sense of loss, but maybe also to engender and promote the sense of loss, as we explained earlier. And meat and wine are often associated with simcha, right? Ein simcha ela b'basar v'yayin, right? People who have smokers and the sous vides and people who love grilling, right? That's one of their favorite expressions in Shas. Ein simcha ela b'basar v'yayin. That true happiness is when you have meat and wine. And so, joking aside, but since that happiness is associated with the elegance and the regal grilled meat and fine wine, we minimize our simcha during this time. So the Kolbo says that's the reason why we refrain from meat and wine, because to minimize our level of happiness during this time. And then finally, Ron's going to be happy because then the Beis Yosef quotes, in the name of Rav Asher. It might be quoting the Rush. The Rush was Rabbeinu Asher. Shetam hanimnoim me'basar v'yayin. What's the reason why we refrain from meat and wine in these days? V'nei shabo batal hatamid v'gam nisuch hayayin. If I can ask you to mute yourselves, please. I can't mute you when I'm on screen share. So, okay, thank you. So Rabbeinu Asher says, "Shetam hanimnoim me'basar v'yayin me'yadayim v'taz v'nei why? Shabo batal hatamid v'gam nisuch hayayin." Ooh, the sacrifices were annulled during this time. V'gam nisuch hayayin, and the wine libation stopped. They would offer sacrifices on a regular basis in the Beis Hamikdash. And they would use wine libations over the course of the year. On Sukkot, they would add not only wine libations, they would also have water libations. Water and nature is one of the themes of Sukkot. But because the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed and the sacrifices were annulled and the wine libations were stopped, the meat sacrifices were stopped and the wine libations were stopped. So that's why we refrain from meat and wine during this time. And so basically it's a minhag. It's a minhag, but it's a minhag of tremendous importance because it revolves around our connection to Yerushalayim and the Beis Hamikdash. The Shulchan Aruch makes a very, very strong comment. He says that any person who doesn't take it seriously, he should be poretz geder yinashchenu nachash. It's a pasuk from Kohelet that a person who breaches a fence should be bitten by a serpent. And basically that we have to take the words of the rabbis seriously and the customs that they establish, because they help us understand, of course, the spirit of the Torah law and the spirit of Judaism, and they want to get us thinking about that we're missing the meat sacrifices, we're missing the wine libations. We're supposed to minimize our level of simcha, and meat is associated with simcha. And so it's something that we should take seriously. There's a Gemara that says that in terms of the value of minhag, let me just share a story. I'll leave out the Gemara because we're running out of time. I wanted to leave time for a couple of questions. Let me tell one story, and let me see what's in the chat box here. Okay, good. From Stephanie, Yemenite minhag is to not eat meat only the week of Tisha B'Av. Okay, that's interesting. And that's based, there is an opinion like that in the Shulchan Aruch, Stephanie. And number two, the Rambam, right? The Rambam says that there's a minhag to refrain from meat in that week. Although then he continues further and says that, we put away the butcher knife at the beginning of Rosh Chodesh Av. There's a cute story about and it's told as a true story, but, it's a little bit like Rabbi Beryl Wine was once asked, are all the stories that you tell true? And Rabbi Wine says, yes, all the stories that I tell are true. Just some haven't happened yet. So this story is told as a true story. It might have happened, might not have happened, but it's a very powerful message about a man who, what happened? He wanted to bring his Rebbe a gift right before Pesach. Right, Pesach is coming up again next year, coming up in a few months, 9 months or so. So, but it's always appropriate to talk about Pesach. So a man came and what he did was he went to his garden, he took some carrots, and he brought these very plump carrots to his rabbi, to his Rebbe, to use for karpas. He shows up at the door a few hours before Pesach and he hands him the bag of carrots. He says, please, Rebbe, use it for karpas. The Rebbe says, thank you very much. Chag Sameach. The man goes back to his home and he sees the gardener and he says, you know what, let me ask the gardener what his secret is, how he gets the carrots so plump. And the gardener says to him that what I do to get the carrots so ripe and plump is every single day, I sprinkle beer on the carrots. Oh my gosh, suddenly it hits him that beer is chametz and the carrots are chametzdik. It's 2 hours before Pesach. He runs over to the rabbi's house, knocks on the door. He says, Rebbe, throw out the carrots. They're chametz. Don't use them for the Seder. Don't use them for karpas. And the rabbi says, thank you, Ruvain, very much. I'm surprised to hear it, but you should know, don't worry. I already burned the carrots with the chametz. So the chassid, the man said, Baruch Hashem, I'm so relieved. But then he felt a little bit insulted. He was slighted. He said, Rebbe, why did you throw them out? Why did you burn them with the chametz? And the Rebbe said, you know what? I'll tell you why. Because I didn't know whether they were kosher, not kosher, chametz, not chametz. All I know is that my mother and my grandmother and great-grandmother never used carrots for karpas. And so I knew there was something strange with the whole concept, and that's why I just got rid of it. And it turned out in that story that they were chametz. Rabbi Soloveitchik, so I tell you that story to teach us the importance of minhag, the importance of custom. That yes, there's Torah. That a person should also understand the distinction between laws. You have Torah laws, you have rabbinic laws, and then you have minhagim. But minhag Yisrael Torah. Minhag is something that's very important to observe. Rav Soloveitchik once gave a whole 2-hour shiur about the importance of sitting for Havdalah. That when a person says Havdalah, you should be seated. Why? Because if you're fulfilling the mitzvah for someone else, it's better if you're sitting down because there's more of a sense of permanence, right? I look at you, all of you, you're sitting down. Some of you are lounging on your chair, you're reclining, you're comfortable, right? We're seated together. We almost feel as if we're together. So when you're seated, then there's more of a sense of connectedness and permanence. So Rav Soloveitchik gave a whole shiur that you should be seated for Havdalah. Does anyone here sit when they say Havdalah? So, Rabbi, you sit when you say Havdalah? Okay, Rabbi Simcha Green does. Well, that's just because you're knocked out from the course of the Shabbos, Rav Simcha. No, just kidding. But anyway, I think it was Rav Moshe Tendler who went to the house of the Rav Soloveitchik, and he saw that Rav Soloveitchik was okay. And he noticed Rav Soloveitchik stood for saying Havdalah. So right after the Havdalah, Rabbi Tendler said, Rebbe, a month ago you gave us a whole 2-hour shiur that you should sit for Havdalah. Why did you stand for Havdalah? And Rav Soloveitchik said, yes, it's true that it's preferable to sit for Havdalah. But I stand because my father stood and my grandfather stood, and that's why I stand for Havdalah. It's the power of minhag. To all of you, I wish you kudos for observing the Torah laws, the rabbinic laws, but also the customs of this period of time. You observe the customs, you learn about them, which is what we're doing tonight, and you're going to make sure to transmit it to the future generations. And what we spoke about tonight is, this meat and wine. We gave a few different sources, a few different reasons. The Jerusalem Talmud. We quoted the precedent from Daniel, and then we quoted two other reasons. The two most compelling reasons, I think, simply is that we minimize our simcha during this time. And lastly, I think the most compelling to me is the annulment of the sacrifices and wine libations, and that's why we refrain during the 9 days. Let me open up, Yashikol, to all of you, let me open up, we'll take a question or two.
I got one. Isn't it understood that the Yerushalmi, because of its period of time and what was going on in Eretz Yisrael at the time, the text of the Yerushalmi is not as reliable, and we could have just said, oh, there's a mistake in the Yerushalmi, and then be done with it.
Well, that's interesting, meaning that you're saying that because of that time period, they weren't able to record the texts as accurately?
Right. That's what I was taught.
Let me look into that. That's interesting. I always thought we followed the Babylonian Talmud more because it was compiled and edited later. It's also based more on logic, on logical discussions. There's quite a bit of overlap between the two Talmuds. But Alan, that's interesting. I want to look into that in terms of whether scholars have found more inaccuracies in the text of the Jerusalem Talmud. It could be.
You ever hear the expression?
Yeah, Madeline.
Nice.
Madeline and then Sam.
As something as a confirmation, I'll keep the rabbi's name secret for now, but because the 3 weeks and the 9 days comes at a time when under normal circumstances, a lot of the department stores are having big sales. And although we are not supposed to buy new clothes and things of that sort, so
Sorry, Madeline?
Yeah.
I think there's some noise coming from your computer, but that's okay. I'm sorry. I was trying to shut the noise. Go say again.
About buying new clothes during this period of time. So it falls generally, not in these years, but this year, it falls like special end of season sale and, take advantage. So I said, but, I asked this rabbi, but, what about these sale times? So he says, if it's on sale, it's okay to buy it. but
Madeline, it's absolutely true. Madeline, that's actually the halacha. That if something's on sale and it's going to cause you a financial loss, the rabbis, believe it or not, are concerned about your pocketbook and are concerned about your wallet. And so if it's a financial loss that would be incurred, then you're allowed to buy the item if it's on sale. Yeah, Sam, go ahead.
I think it's a joke. It says, if this didn't happen, it should have happened.
That's right. If it didn't happen, it should have happened. Or if it happened, this is how I did it, right?
Right.
In the words of O.J. Simpson. Yeah, Fran. Okay, let's end with Fran's comment.
Me? Okay, I came in a little bit late. When did the 9 days actually start? I missed that.
Tomorrow.
9 days start tonight. Actually, the 9 days just started.
Does that mean all the kosher markets are closed for 9 days? And
No.
no?
So the kosher market, the kosher markets will be open. And actually, they'll even still continue selling meat and chicken because for Shabbat, you're allowed to have, at the beginning, we said you can have meat and wine and chicken on Shabbat. You could also have it for special occasions. There are exceptions. But also, and it reminds me, Fran, you reminded me of an ad I once saw. I saw an ad for a restaurant where it said, dairy menu special for the 9 days. Make this the best 9 days ever. So I thought, in terms of, I thought that kind of went against the spirit of the law. But anyway, it's okay to enjoy dairy foods, but it shouldn't be the best 9 days ever. The only way it could be the best 9 days ever is not if you have great dairy food, but if in Yirtzeh Hashem, a Mashiach comes and we go back to Yerushalayim, that'll make it the best 9 days ever. And
Amen.
if somehow the pandemic ends, and we get back to some semblance of normalcy.
Are you back
Thank
to
you all
teaching?
so much. Keep going strong. All the
Are
best.
you back to teaching your class? Because I missed you the last few weeks.
Yes, I missed you, Fran, as well. Yes, we're back to giving the class, and we'll have a class next week, please God, as well.
Okay, I got a yard site notice from Beth Jacob, and I'll take care of that. And I'm partially doing that only, for my deceased relatives, the victors, but also in honor of your class. I just love it. I always learn something, and it's fabulous. So thank you. Thank
Fran,
you.
that's very kind and sweet. Thank you so much. And may the neshamas have an aliyah. Yeah.
Amen. Rabbi, it's a pleasure to see you again.
Likewise.
Yeah.
We missed you on my Monday class, Ayala.
Yeah, I had my grandkid for the first time in ages. I had my grandkids distancing in my backyard. I couldn't miss that.
No.
I'm sorry.
So just a quick thought, Rabbi. I'll tell you a minhag, a custom that's starting to grow as a minhag. So you're not allowed to do business deals. You're not allowed to, go to court on Tisha B'Av and all that kind of stuff. So what does a lawyer or a businessman do on Tisha B'Av? So I started a custom about 40 years ago, but that's the day I'm going to clean up my office, get rid of all the papers, throw out what I don't need, and clean up the place, right? So as I keep telling this to my friends and my colleagues, it's become a custom that Tisha B'Av is the day you clean up your desk.
That's good.
Like it.
So if you want to know where that custom came from, I'll take the credit for it.
It's a good
Okay.
productive way to use Tisha B'Av.
Yeah. I've been doing it for a long time.
Laila Tov.
Okay, Lila Tov,
Lila
everyone.
Tov.
So nice
Okay.
seeing you and learning with you. Keep going strong. All the best.
Thank you.
Take care. Take care, Abby,
Thank
Alan,
you.
Mike, Gavi, Rabbi Simcha, Jerry, Madeline, Lyndon, Dick, Ron,
Rabbi
Fran,
Simcha.
Thank you.
David, Adina, David. All the
Mike,
best, guys.
Laila Tov, Mike.
Laila Tov.
Thank you. Good night.
Hi, Gabby.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Rabbi Green.
Mike.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good night.
Good to see you. I haven't seen you for
Night,
a while.
everyone.
Told me yesterday.
Good night.
Chodesh Tov,
Oh,
everybody.
Chodesh Tov.
Chodesh Tov.